Lake Istokpoga is located north of Lake Okeechobee. In this video, I'd like to show you around the lake a little bit, as well as some of the techniques I use to photograph it. On my first leg of this journey, I stayed at the Cypress Isles fishing camp. The camp allows me to park my boat right behind my van, so in the morning I can get up, walk about 30 feet, and I can be right in the water and out on the lake before sunrise. The marina has a dusk to dawn light at the end of this little harbor there, so when you come in late at night, you'll be able to find where the marina is at. You'll have to forgive the horizons being out of level. The only video camera I have is in my Nikon D300S, so I'm hand holding a very large camera and trying to steer the boat at the same time. When I photograph an area like this, I always scout it out the day before. When I find a suitable spot for a sunrise or a sunset, I mark it as a waypoint on my Garmin, so when I leave the marina in the morning, I know exactly where I'm going to be headed. Those of you who know me know I always shoot with a tripod. When I shoot in freshwater, I don't worry too much about protecting the tripod against corrosion. I do hang on to the camera strap at all times. Also, I use a set of pipes to anchor the boats to keep it from drifting away from the tripod. I do a fair amount of my photography standing in the water. However, there are places in the lake that have a very mucky bottom, so you need to be careful where you stand. Also be aware that this lake has a lot of alligators. You'll see them all around your boat while you're out there. So be aware that you're not alone out there. When you reach in the water to pull your stakes up or move your boat, or if you decide to get out of the boat, always be aware that you're not alone. Just remember, if an alligator grabs you by the butt and starts to shake, there's a very good chance you're going to get motion blur in your image, and Photoshop is not going to correct that. When I shoot something like this, I generally shoot in brackets. With the camera on the tripod secured, sometimes I decide I want to use an HDR to complete an image, or just to increase the odds that I'll bring home a keeper. Unless you have plenty of time, there's a very good chance the day that you're photographing, the weather may not be optimal and you may not have another chance to come back. When I was shooting at the lake, we had winds coming in off of the lake at 10 to 15 mile an hour, which made the water get very choppy and the branches move a lot, which creates a new set of challenges for a photographer. I knew before I got there that I wanted to do a series of images with silky still sort of water using neutral density filters. But when you're shooting at 1 second, 1.5 second shutter speed with the wind blowing the branches and the wind blowing the water, it becomes very difficult. If you're thinking digitally before you go into the field, you're already prepared to handle these situations. So the question is, how do you slow the water down and still have a fast enough shutter speed to stop the branches from blowing in the wind? The way I do it is I set the camera on a tripod, I put the neutral density filters on the camera, and I photograph the water. The water and the roots are stationary. They're not going to go anywhere. And then I take off the neutral density filters and I set the ISO or the shutter speed to handle the movement of the branches, and I take 2 images and simply layer them when I get home in Photoshop. Of course, the other alternative is to not take the picture at all, wait and come back several times until you can find optimal conditions. The silky water effect really doesn't look as nice in color as it does in black and white. So when you convert your color into black and white, you'll notice that the water tends to take on a whole different look. In order to get more than just a silhouette of a tree at sunset, I generally will use an HDR to bring out the exposure of the tree itself, so you can see some detail in the tree and not just a silhouette. In order to capture this sunset, it required that I get in the water and move out into the lilies to get the proper composition. My goal was to get those 3 little trees on the left hand side into the picture. I will shoot a bracket much like this one. If you'll notice, I took a picture of the back of my camera during the daylight during a bracket to show you what the histogram looks like, and if you'll notice, it starts on the left and the hump moves all the way over to the right, which assures me that I have a good exposure to do an HDR. I think the most successful HDRs are ones where you allow the software to do the HDR, or do like I do a lot of times, do it by hand in Photoshop. But when you're done, take your best exposed image and layer it on top and blend it in at about 50%, and it brings a lot of realism back to the image, and it doesn't look so much like a cartoon figure. You'll notice with this black and white image that you can see all the detail of the side of the trunk of the tree that's away from the sun. Under a single exposure image, you would have to pick a blown out sky or a dark trunk. But using multiple layers, you can expose and you can actually create the image you saw with your eyes. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you thought it was informative. Thank you for watching.